Good morning, YouTube fans. It's a Friday morning here in New York State. It's about 7:30 in the morning, and it's grocery shopping day for me. Today I thought I would try, and when I say try, I do mean try. I had some difficulty yesterday trying to upload a video, so I'm not sure what I did wrong. It was perfect the first time, but here we go. I'm using a different camera. Today I thought that I would like to show you how to cast on 2 ways and then do a demonstration on knitting the garter stitch. So this is a video for absolute beginners. I want you to remember as I make this video that I do knit left-handed, so to you it may appear backward. But if you're a left-handed knitter, this video is especially for you. I have my knitting needles right here. These are vintage, these are wood, and they are vintage needles. Like I said in my last video, I've been knitting since 1975. So I really don't use straight knitting needles anymore. I've swapped them out for round circulars. A lot of people think that if you're using a circular needle that you have to be knitting in the round, and you don't. Many times circular needles are used to be able to knit back and forth across the row and to hold a lot of stitches. So I switched actually all of my straight needles out to the circular needles. Okay, let's look at some cast-ons. Camera adjusted so you'll be able to see it here. There we go, I think. Okay. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to make a loop. And I do mine just as simply as like that. When you see you've made the X, you've crossed the strings, then you can pull the back piece of yarn through and you have a slip knot. It's called a slip knot because it slides. It will slide up and down the work. Alright, so the first way that I learned to cast on was, I believe they call it a manual cast on, and I've seen a lot of people do it, and I think it's done a lot of different ways. But for me, this is how I learned. You wrap the yarn around your finger till it makes a loop, grab the loop and pull it through. And here you can see the row of stitches that we have cast on the needle. So we have 1, which is the first loop, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. You can see that the stitches are fairly even and close together, and that's what you want. You don't want to have a lot of space or a lot of looseness between. I think this way to cast on is a good way, and it's especially a good way for beginners. This is how I cast on now. This particular cast on, when I learned it, it was called a knitting them on cast on. I don't know if it is anymore. Things change. But you would put your needle into the loop after you've made your loop and you have it on your needle. Then you'd wrap your yarn around the needle and you'd pull it through. So you're essentially using the needles to knit the stitches on. And you're going to want to put some practice into this so that you can get especially good at doing it. So we'll cast on a few, and then what we'll do is we'll learn a beginning knit stitch, which we'll incorporate and use all together to make a knit pattern stitch, which is known as the garter stitch. So let's see, we'll put 10 or 12 on here. With the garter stitch, it's a simple pattern where you knit every stitch and you knit every row. So it doesn't matter how many stitches you put on. There isn't an even or an odd count. You can just put on any amount of stitches, and you're going to knit every stitch and you're going to knit every row. The garter stitch it's a texturized piece of knitting cloth is what it will produce, and it's used for many things, and you'll see that after you master the stitch you can find yourself a pattern that just uses the garter stitch, and you'll see that there are many ways to use it. Okay, we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 stitches on the needle. So now we're going to begin the garter stitch. Start with the first stitch. We knit it, take it off. Knit it, take it off. We're bringing our yarn around the needle and taking it off. And I'm doing this slowly so that you can see. Around the needle, and we're taking it off. I think garter stitch was the first stitch that I taught myself. As I stated, back in the 1970s when I was learning to knit, there wasn't the resources, there wasn't this information superhighway, which we're so fortunate to have today in the internet, where you can learn just about anything, and you can have access to that internet through a small device such as a telephone, a cellular phone. So when I learned to knit, those things weren't available. And I showed in my last video, if you remember or if you've seen it, the little booklet that I used to learn to knit. And because I discovered that I knit left-handed, everything was backward. But it still is doable, and it all worked out. Okay, so now we turn and we're going to do row 2. And again, we're just going to knit every stitch. As an idea, sometimes I knit the garter stitch when I'm making my dishcloths. You can purchase cotton yarn. Lily & Cream, I think, is the company that I use, and they're readily available around here where I live, right in the Walmart store. But you could get some cotton yarn as an idea for a first project. You could cast on as many stitches as you would want for the width of your dishcloth, and you could knit every row, garter stitch, and when you're finished you would have a wonderful dishcloth that'd be nubby, bubby I guess, or nubby, and it scrubs the dishes so well. I just love a knit dishcloth. So now we just turn, we're doing our third row. And we'll do one more row after this so that you can see the texture, the ridges that it makes. Again, we're just knitting every stitch and we're knitting every row. So it's a simple little stitch. It makes a wonderful garter stitch fabric. And it's used for so many different things. But for a beginning knitter, a dishcloth would be a really simple thing to make, and in making it you'll be developing your tension, you'll be developing your rhythm and how you knit, and it's knit, it's just straight, so it's not going to have a lot of decreases or increases or any other thing, just a straight knit. Okay, we're on our 4th row now, and we're knitting across. And once we get across, we'll look at it, look at the fabric. And you'll be able to see. And again, you can see I'm just knitting every stitch. Just knitting every stitch. There we go. Now, I'm going to hold this up so you can see it. And you can see that when you knit garter stitch, it makes a ridge. Every 2 rows makes a ridge. It's the same on the back as it is on the front. And here it is on the back. So, and it's all these little bumps from the ridges that make it a wonderful dishcloth stitch. So I do hope you try that. Practice with the garter stitch. Try to make a dishcloth. Start small and practice, practice, practice. And soon you will master knitting. All right, well, happy Friday to everyone and happy knitting. Cast on. Bye-bye.